Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. To start with, before we go and talk about the theme of the session of you both being poets, writing about other poets, tell us a bit about your work as poets and how you came to poetry and how much of it defines your lives. Ladies first.
Hi, can you all hear me? Thank you for that question. I was just talking about this at the other panel yesterday. I think each of us comes to writing, to art, to poetry from very, very different contexts. That may seem like an obvious thing, but it isn't obvious because people assume that it is that everybody begins at the starting point for the race is the same. It's not a race, firstly, and it isn't the same starting point. So thank you for asking me that question. I think what prepared me for the life of a writer, or for actually even being part of this larger writerly world or writerly life, is the fact that growing up as the daughter of a single mother, I've always felt like an outlier, right? So our family was not a regular family with a father, a mother, a brother, and a sister, that kind of a thing. This was way back in the 70s. So I think I sort of learned very early that you need to have different kind of coping skills, and also that you have to sort of figure out, navigate this life, this terrain. So I think for me, a lot of my work has come from that space of feeling like maybe I don't belong, but making that space for myself. So I think I sort of learned to get back into the world, enter the sort of the skin of the world through my writing, right? And also by, in a sense, not just practicing my own work, but also engaging with the work of other writers, other poets, especially women poets like Vatsala, who's also my mother, with Salma, and now more recently Subramani Bharat.
Hi. First, I would like to thank formally Hindu Literature Festival and also Prakriti Foundation and Ranvir Shah bringing me here once again. And I do remember, Ranvir, on the note of gratitude, that when my Banaras was published back in 2017, in 2018, when I came to Chennai, I was so delighted. I was thinking that, maybe, my poetic journey is largely, circumstantial. And through that circumstance, I brought Banaras to Chennai. So that's where I find, where do I stand in terms of my poetic journey, because I'm not a native, the language that I speak and talk about, my mother tongue, but I write what they call in Mumbai poetry circuit, Anglophone, which is an anthropologically suspect category for me as a political scientist and sociologist. So if you look at the works that I have done over 20 years, there I'm trying to track that how, I still bring, I saw my bio and I'm very happy that, you refer to some of my, the idioms and the native touch that I brought to, English poetry, what they call English poetry. So in that sense, I'm not English, because I'm homeschooled. I never went to school. I was raised, in a landscape where I played with, Odia, Bangla, and Adivasi languages, etc., Ranvir. So the journey has been very chaotic. Inside and outside. And out of that chaos, when I landed in Oklahoma, those days without any GPS, etc., on the first day, Twister hit my campus, tornado hit my campus. I asked my American friend, what is tornado? And he used the American slang like President Trump, that kind of a language he used. And then I went and searched. So from the tornado, sheltered home, I started writing in a language which was not my own language, So here I am today, and thank you all of you to, appreciate the kind of poetry I'm doing. So that's where.
So tell us how you're a political scientist, you're working with an organization, an institution, you have been an academic until very recently in a full-time capacity. How does the process, before we go into the work of the poets that you've written about, how is the process of engaging with poetry, your own personal poetry? Like a lot of the authors have been asked through the session and in literature festivals, the ones who get up and write regularly. But if you have a job and you're still writing poetry I don't want to say on the side, but you're still writing poetry. How do you excavate that time?
Yeah, thank you. So I was writing on the side. So I think, in a sense, there's always a little bit of moonlighting, I think, involved. So I can say this now that I'm safely away from that whole full-time job scenario. But having said that, it sounds great, to say I was able to moonlight and so on, but it isn't easy. It's sort of, I think, earlier this morning, I was at a session where Kiran Desai was talking about how she took 20 years to write her new book, and she didn't notice the passing of time, right? And I was like, how did you not notice? Because for me, 20 years, 25 years, as a parent and as a working woman, every minute of the thing, the tiredness and the fatigue of it has, I think, lodged itself in my body and in my mind. And it's not just me, and I know it's true for so many of us here. So that it was, for the lack of a better word, a blur. But I think in the middle of all of that, Ashwani used the word chaotic or whatever, right? A tornado. So there is a tornado of life, I think, and you have to learn to write, or you write because it's an inner demon pushing you. It's a horrible thing. It's really not very nice at some level. It's pushing you, and you have to write, otherwise you're going to implode within. Then there is an external world, and there's the timetable, and there's things to do at home, and there's other sorts of life challenges which you have to navigate. So you do it not by getting up every day and writing, because that's never going to happen. It did happen briefly when I woke up at some unearthly hour to write a novel, and I don't think I want to go back to that. It was very hard. But you do it seasonally. So I did learn, because I was a teacher, I learned to work with the rhythm of the semester. So I think that was how I measured my life, semester, the exam, the grading. Then other things, parenting would sometimes, of course, always get in the way. But you figure out, and there is no one size fits all. Obviously, all of us have very different lives. So that's just a very long answer for that.
Yeah, I would say that I have a full-time job, what they call professorial, and in a place, in an institution that's known for, democratic struggle, contestation. So in my sense, in my context, Ranvir, I live dangerously and write dangerously. I mean, like, that's the way, if you just check it out, Scroll has just published a series, almost last 3 years. First day of Jan, they published me. And that's where I'm trying to describe, what is my process of writing, especially poetic process. And this is where there is no discipline in me. I was listening to writers, and I work across writers. This book has almost 200 poets across 22 languages, so they are my friends. And my great teacher, the legend of Indian poetry, Jayanto Mahapatra, was very disciplined, and he had a dark room, where he would sit down, a physics teacher, and write. But in my case, I'm very chaotic, Like, the love is so chaotic, so I travel, then I write. I write at the airport. I write, even in the washroom also, sit down and write a stuff. I can write anywhere, in any context, It's a maddening, it's a maddening experience for me. And of late, when I started revealing the secrets of writing, and my next book, Loss of Ordinary Things, carries almost 200 poems. And I'm getting, inside quite a lot of praise, because how do you manage to write 200 poems? And the reason that I, over time, I remember Jayanta used to tell me, write 1,000 poems and dedicate to the Shiva or Kali. They would eat up all your poems. So that's my process, I talk to Shiva and talk to Kali. That's not my language. That's not my language. If you allow me someday and somewhere I read Auntie Maria poem, me picanto, perelesanto kind of stuff, the language I use, I'm not familiar, unknown. But there is an inner order. There is an inner aesthetic delight, and that's where I connect to, heritage, traditions, great teachers, I read her and new book, that, Mahabharata, Notes on Mahabharata, inspires me. So that way, there is a whole process, invisible, unknown, and dangerous. So that's why I would describe my poetic processes. Thank you.
Since you've now come to the point where we've talked about reading others' poetry, can you share with us how you came to write and choose the work of the poets that you've written about? So tell us a bit of the genesis of the project, and then perhaps after that, a bit of the process, and then after that, if you can read a poem from that.
So I think it's best that I perhaps speak about my work as a translator of poetry, which is something I got into by accident, serendipity again. And I think one of the things that struck me was, I was not going to just translate because somebody was a big writer or somebody was very well known, not necessarily for those reasons. But I needed to convince myself there had to be a why, for whom to translate, really. And so for me, I think I realized the importance of, in a sense, archiving my mother's work, and I felt that it very, very strongly called to ensure, in a way, that her work, her life, and they are the same thing at some level, that her poetry would enjoy an afterlife, right? And in many ways, and in more ways than one, that it should be read in another language. It should be read in English, perhaps even in other languages, not just in Tamil. So so that's one of the things. And because she was my mother, and so I could actually just go across to her and ask her if I had queries about her work and that kind of a thing. It was also sometimes difficult because it was intense, it was complicated, there was a certain enmeshment in it, there was too much knowing about her life, and there were, of course, too many also blind spots, right? So I'm still not sure whether that I made the best choice of translator for her, but I just went with it, right? So that was one. And I also then subsequently translated the work of the Tamil poet Salma. I co-translated with Ashwani Kumar, so which exists as a book, so I Salma. So it's a small press. Please support small presses. But so that happened, and currently I'm working on Subramanya Bharati. Again, with Ashwani Kumar, we are co-translating Bharatiyar's work. But I will, if I may, talk a little bit about how, one of the things that you do when you're translating poetry as a poet, right? I think you get other poets. So that's one thing. When he said tornado and chaos, I said, yeah, okay, fellow chaos, right? So I think there's something about it. There's something essentially a little off, I think, about poets. So you get that. And I don't think somebody who translates prose is going to get that. So that's one thing. And also, I think as poets, we work with the ear more than anything else. We work with the heart, with the intuition, with the ear a lot. So I think especially poetry, given its maddening syntax, I mean, to translate the syntax from prose from one language to the other is hard enough. We all know that. Tamil to English syntactically, they're so different as languages. But poetry, there's another layer of syntactical challenges. There's also visual topography, right? How do you get that to carry? Say if I'm translating Bharati, there is so much, it's music. Everybody owns Bharati. Everybody knows or think they know Bharati, right? And so there is that whole nervousness around it, right? So I think as poets, translating other poets, I would like to believe that we might actually be somewhat better at it than prose writers who translate. Yeah, if I may read. Yeah. Okay, so I would like to read. So I'll read this poem that this was a co-translation, me and Subhashi Krishnaswamy, and it was part of this book, anthology called Interior Decoration Poems by 54 Women in 10 Languages, Women Unlimited, right? So this is Vatsala's poem. The original is called Naan Yen Kavingar Agavillai. Why didn't I become a poet? So it also speaks to what I just said earlier, that, sometimes our lives are so chaotic, things actually don't get written, and that's what Vatsala also writes about. Why didn't I become a poet? It's only after you asked me that I wondered why I never became a poet. Digging deep, I find no evidence that I'm not one. I would like to ask you something. Do dead poems count? Since they dissolved while still unborn, I couldn't give them shape. I wasn't aware of their inception. So, I never recorded their time of birth. But with some, their time of death is clear to me. One died when my grandmother praised the neat way I folded clothes. A couple, when I picked up the ladle, sorry for my mother, who struggled with my brother's insatiable hunger and my father's fastidious tongue. A few passed away when I befriended a typewriter to save up for a gold chain just so a yellow thread could be tied around my neck. Bored, are you? I'll keep it short then. A few hundred vanished as I washed my baby's bottoms, tutored my darling children, saved up for my son's education, stood by my husband as he washed the feet of the son-in-law. If they all come to life and take shape, a poet I will be. If not, next month, after my husband's death anniversary, when my green card darlings go back home, after my numb feelings are massaged and I journey a little into myself and release my breath completely, who knows, I might become a brand new poet. So I'll read from the Salma collection. The Vatsala translations are not yet a book, so it's also an open call for anybody in the audience who can connect me with the publisher, right? Okay. So Salma, this is Salma, which I co-translated with Ashwani Kumar. This is called Story of the Deep Night, Irandam Jamatin Kadai. These nights, following the birth of my children, you seek, in the midst of my nakedness, so familiar to you, an old, unblemished beauty, and are disappointed. You're revolted, you declare, by my fat body and its stretch marks. Your own body, you say, is unchanging. Buried in the deep valley of silence, my voice moans and sighs. It's true that your body is unlike mine, loud and open. Yours proclaims itself. Before this, perhaps, you have had children elsewhere by others. Since you have remained unmarked by their birth, you can be proud. But what of me? These birthmarks cannot be mended, neither my decay. After all, this body is not a piece of paper to be cut and pasted. There is no restoring it. Nature plays false much more than you. Wasn't it with you that it began, that first stage of my downfall? Stranger than evening is night, that breeder of dreams. The tiger so peaceful in the picture that hangs on the wall, visits my bedside at night, watches keenly. Salma. Yeah, okay. I will read Work in Progress, Bharati, Subramanya Bharati, from Parashakti Vanakkam, which is part 2, Canto 3 of Panchali Sabadam. Prayer to Parashakti. Out of one, the sculptor fashions a temple doorstep. The other stone he elevates with his artistry, turns it into God's image. O Mother of the universe, you who calls the shots, shaper of forms, to you I surrender. Come, chisel away at me, sculpt me, Mother, into a skillful poet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Over to you.
Yeah, so I think, listening to Salma and Salma, my sister, everyone, believes that Salma and me are cousins. So I'm just thinking about, translation, transcreation, and then, coming to poetry as I came to this world. I mean, like the world of poetry. So Ranvir, in a sense that, I have my own collective. I have my own collective, Indian Novelist Collective. There we work with translators, writers, and we have done some translation. Daisy Rockwell, translated classic novel, 55 Pillars and Red Walls, Pachpan Khambe Lal Diware of Usha Priyavanda. And also Jerry Pinto did, Marathi novel, Vishram Vedika's novel, classic once again. So coming back to, translation, transcreation, and translatability, that's the challenge for writers across, not just poets alone, And this is where I, I don't want to shock you, but the translation, is like, to be a good translator is to be really a good, unfaithful lover, If you are a faithful lover, I think, as Umberto Eco says, that you end up with a lot of chaos and, misreadings and failures. So like in the love, if you are really, very, type of pure lover, you're gonna, end up with failures. So same in the translation. So I work across languages, Marathi, Gujarati, I live in a city where Sindhi, Marathi, on the street we speak multiple languages, Ranvir knows because he loves Mumbai, sandwich. So he knows how sandwich is made, almost poetic, The way they layer the sandwich, like we layer the poem, it's that kind of, with the languages, And imagine, translation, imagine translating a novel with Ram Vedekar to, of late I'm also started translating. As Ranjit told me that, you have to be unfaithful lover, Ashwani, in real life. You have to translate. So of late, in my new book is available, River of Songs, once again dedicated to the memory of the legendary poet Jayanta Mahapatra. So this is where, I play with translation, various forms of translation. In fact, going, as Arunava recently at JLF told me that, Ashwani, it also becomes transcreation. You move into a different world, it's not that, it's a semiotic, it's a mythic, So when you translate and look at your own translation, exactly you find another Salma, So when I write, I become a woman, I always tell my male poets that you can't be a good poet unless until when writing you become a woman. So let me sing something, and it's also where I'm trying to do a lot of linguistic experiments, and where I'm trying to develop, my own language, which does not fit into whether it's English or Tamil or Telugu or, that kind of fundamentalism, I'm really worried about fundamentalism of various, because I live in the city of Bombay where I can't afford to, work with any kind of fundamentalism, and there is also, this intolerance of fundamentalism. So here, and also something I revealed to all of you and would advise young poets not to repeat that, because sometimes I really forget my poems. And when people come for publication, so I just sit down and rewrite, the same poem. I have written my multiple versions of my own poems. So like, I'm looking at my, Auntie Maria poem, and I find that, no, I have written several versions and several reprints. And here I find, rather than Auntie Maria, it has become Granny Maria. Imagine, and published. So young poets don't do that, because when you
but
really...
like Srilata said, maybe in 20 years, as Kiran took time to write her book,
So,
Auntie became Granny.
Yeah, Granny. So Auntie became Granny. So, and this is a poem where also it speaks of, where I come from, how do I write. I was in Kathmandu and, looking at the tantric architecture, what they call Nevari. So here it goes like this. And it's a language poem. Granny Maria's village home, Granny Maria's village home was an old poem. It resembled a floating ship, a cloudy rock, or a mirror of red ribbons in the prep school. It was 5 stories tall without any walls. Its roof bears infinite surrogate seasons embroidered with songs on banana leaves. Floors upstairs and downstairs were carnival tricks. There were 55 windows. There were 55 windows, gossiping, giggling, brokering peace among unfaithful lovers at the doorway, aging gypsies on wooden toy lions guarded all our possessions marked with ascetic asterisks. Granny Maria's parents, Mr. Nandi and Mrs. Nandi, were distant cousins of Japatista. They slurred, erred, while selling lamps in the refugee camps. Occasionally they came to the village, burned effigies of indigo planters, and taught neighbors to cook octopus in creamy sauce. People say, I don't say, people say everyone in the village loved pinto beans and red paprika, but Granny Maria grew up on pancakes, apple pies, and crunchy crackers. After a shot of white rum punch, Granny sang, Picanto, picanto, per il santo, picanto, per il santo. We don't remember what those words meant, but we know that she, in her heat-proof pleated cotton skirt and blouse, often slept in the clay fireplace. After the Civil War, there was no grain in the house, nor black salt. With an ivory hoop in her left toe, she climbed to the sky on the pretext of worshipping a snake-armed god. She unstitched the lining of the heavens with her squeaking scissors, plucked sea almonds, roasted them in the heat of the lightning, and fed the daughters of unwed sparrows. All we know, everyone in my village lived happily ever after. You would never see Granny, but visit Granny Maria's house in my village. It is still an old poem. Picanto per il santo, picanto per il santo. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you share with us also, Ashwini, some of the work that brought you to Jayanta Mahapatra's translations and the book that you did, and tell us a bit about your association an engagement with him and his work?
I remember, because while growing up without in school, no convent, unconfed, although I loved nuns and nurses always, I mean like bizarrely, because I live in the fantasy world, There are three things define me before you try to decode, uncode me and find me controversial and prophetic enough. I am whimsy, that's what critic called me, irreverential and in a fantasy world. So that's kind of a three things, Nothing is real here. I'm always surreal. So Ranvir, I wrote a letter while I was in Oklahoma to Jayanto Da. We call him Jayanto Da. That's the tradition back in Odisha, Bengal, and Bihar. And Jayanto flatly, he's a calligrapher, I think if you are in love, please do. I have his letters, private letters. And when he passed away, journalists started chasing me about those love letters, I just claim he was not my father. We were more like lovers, lovers in the realm of poetry. So he flatly wrote a letter that Ashwani, sadly, unfortunately, I closed down the Chandrabhaga. So Chandrabhaga, if you remember, was iconic journal where Srilata, everyone has published, and from Indian languages. So this is where this brought me to Jayanto, and then I started, writing to him. And the last 10 years, he died at the age of 94. So 84 to 94, almost like, everyday engagement, almost like so intimate, So those letters, would arrive, and I have written, if you buy the book, you can see, and you can uncode, decode, our relationship. And also the poetic craft, that you can find, you can also find how Jayanto was trying to shape, a different kind of language for in poetry. Then I got into touch with, and I was writing my Banaras, my epic long poem, and thank you for once again, bringing all over, Prakriti, my epic poem Banaras. And I was intrigued by his classic work. All of you know Jayanto was the first Sahitya Academy recipient of English Poetry Award, 1982. And this relationship, because I'm located in Bombay Poetry, Adil Jasawala, Yunus, and everyone is there. We just lost Keki Daruwala. So you can imagine the land and the landscape and the language that brought me to Jayanto Mahapatra. I went to Cuttack, and I used to go to Cuttack, and I still co-curate a festival dedicated to his memory, Chandrabhaga. That's called Konark Festival, and the book is out of that. And this is where I started looking at his craft and developed a kind of emotional, intimate relationship to his poetic world, the poetic world. So rain, river, and rainbow. That's Jayanta's world, So of late, although in my poetry, let me tell you, with a sense of detachment and unfaithfulness, that's what I meant by unfaithfulness to my own, teacher, lover, whatever you can call him, a friend, a true friend, intimate friend, and a poetic inspiration. Unfaithfully, I never copied anything, Ranvir, from Jayanta's body of works. That's where, Jayanta, and I also helped edit his, Chandrabhaga, the last edition. He was in the ICU and was editing the last volume of Chandrabhaga. And he told me that, I wanted to write blurb for your book, but I don't think I would live longer enough. So what you do, that you write the first page. It's my booker for you. Indeed, writing the first page poem for Chandrabhaga was almost like the biggest award for me in my life. So I wrote that, and where I talked about, rain, rainbow, and Jayanta Mahapatra, including his Puri poems. So, Ranvir, this is where Jayanta's, the land and landscape, and the language, all of us are rooted into three things: land, landscape, and our language. I'm here, the land of, the land of Tamil Nadu, where the ancient language, the oldest language, and I believe that I'm rooted here also.
Do you have one that you can share with us of Jayanta's work?
Yeah. Jayanta's poem or,
Yeah, Jayanta's.
Yeah. But, I would like to come back to that, but this is a poem that Jayanta insisted that, Ranjit Hoskate called Jayanta Mahapatra. If I remember correctly, some 92, 93 piece, I have cited again and again that Ranjit Hoskate, dear friend and a great poet. Jayanta was native Pablo Neruda. Native Pablo Neruda called him. So that really inspired me, and Jayanta loved this poem I wrote for him, and I'm going to read this poem. Pablo Neruda, basically Jayanta Mahapatra in Gaya. And again, many versions again, I keep making mistakes, so please bear with my mistakes. Pablo Neruda in Gaya, the Gaya, the holy city, and Buddha's land too. There were rumors in the holy town. Pablo Neruda was spotted on the ghats of Falgu River. There were rumors in the holy town. Pablo Neruda was spotted on the ghats of Falgu River performing funeral rites for his ancestors. He arrived with ships filled with geranium flowers, tyrant flag catchers, and hermit crabs for local villagers. Crowds of women and laborers from the sand mines gathered for a sight of his tanned, handsome looks, propagating fire and rebellion, tapping their feet, wriggling their bangles and hammers. They started singing his love poem in chorus and offered him jasmine rice pudding in a copper vessel. In the yellow flames of sacrificial fire, Pablo shaved his head and hairy chest. Weeping in sorrow of losing his friends in the civil war, Pablo wrapped in the mendicant betel leaves. He remembered his house in Madrid with crescent balconies on which the light of June slumbered like lovers in the shade. Old-timers say after he finished all the rituals, he became one of us, searching for the secret springs of the cursed river in the prairie heat. I can't tell you everything. But I often hear Pablo's voice between memory and time. That's Jayanta Mahapatra.
Thank you. Can you both quickly, because we're also getting closer to the end of this session, tell us about how you find engaging from the world? You've spoken about some of the challenges of being in a polylingual world. You've done translations, but the world of Indian writing or Anglophone poetry is very different, the publishing world of it, than Indian languages. In fact, in many colleges, it's still true, the vernacular gang is still called with derision the vernies, and so how do we, or how do you as poets see this? How do you engage with poets who write in their natal tongue? And what should or what could be a way forward to, I know it's not something that's going to happen overnight, to get closer, to work together with, to engage more closely? I would love to have both your views very quickly.
Okay, so the one thing I think the good thing about being in India is that I think for all of us, we work with a multilingual consciousness. Most of us know more than one language. We may not know fully well. I mean, we may not be able to read, write, speak, and all of that, but we may understand it. So there's always that consciousness from which we are, most of us, I think, are working, right? And I think early on, I mean, as a poet, I also learned to work with that awareness of all the languages at the back of my head, all the languages that I know at the back of my head, right? So there is that one thing. The other thing is obviously to not think of yourself as this Anglophone poet and as, operating, because then you're confined to a very tiny, it's an annoyingly tiny bubble, I can tell you that, right? I'll be the first to say that, right? So there are like maybe half a dozen poets writing in India in English, and then of that half a dozen, 3 who are getting published by any sort of big publisher who's able to distribute, market, and all of that. The rest are, you're really in that bubble, and you're speaking to each other, right? And which is really boring after a while when you think about it, right? So I think it's actually just to sort of get out of that suffocation, if nothing else. It doesn't have to be with noble intent. But I think in order to grow your own craft, in order to expand your context, experiential context, you need to step out of that damn bubble, and you need to engage with poets who write in other languages. And sometimes you may not know all the other languages. That's why translators exist. Translations exist. So read poets in translation, read poets in their own languages. I can't, sort of say this often enough. And as a teacher, I think I've sort of tried to do that in all my courses. I mean, even if it's called Indian Writing in English, I always have a large module. I sort of bung in a whole lot of poets who write in non-English languages who have been translated, right? So I think that's really important. I'm almost evangelical about it, if you like. Yeah.
As I mentioned, I mean, like no poet in India, as great Malayali poet Sachinandandan reminds us, Yeah, and many, I mean, like, if just look at the body of works of Arundhati Subramaniam, and then you can find the sacredness, you know. This sacredness is not arising out of the purity. I mean, like, that way, you know, there is a resistance to that so-called, may I say, I would say now, that Brahmanical purity. I mean, like, that purity is not part of our DNA, perhaps, you know, the way we look at, you know, our works today. So we all speak, you know, through multiple tongues. We have folk tongues, you know, and I said that I live and work across languages, and that's where, you know, the French poet or, you know, Hungarian poets have the difficulty, you know, and this difficulty is almost untranslatable, you know. This is something that most Indian poets, in any language you write, you know, whether you're writing in Tamil, I work, you know, my friends Tamil, Telugu, I have included in my selections, worked very strongly and hard with them. And I find even in Tamil, and Perumal Murugan is here, and TM is here, just met them, and the kind of, you know, language Perumal uses, I mean, it's not that pure Tamil, you know, I mean, something like pure English, you know, or pure Gujarati, you know. So that's where Adivasi, you know, I work with Adivasi languages, you know, Munda, Urao, etc., my native place, were born and brought up. And this is where those impurities, Ranvir, I mean, like, that has become a new language. And this is where India is heading into. I mean, like, India is becoming different beyond recognition. I would not reflect more on that because that's not the, you know, part of this poetry. But we write within this political environment, the social and cultural environment. India has never ever done that and will never ever do that in a kind of authoritarianism in language also. That one language, one land, etc., etc. That's not going to happen, Ranvir. So back here, you know, the mother tongue, you have multiple mother tongues also. Let me remind you and perhaps caution myself that I don't have one mother tongue, you know. I have many mothers, you know. And this is where I remember always when I write A.K. Ramanujan that, you know, when you speak to a granny, when you speak to, why women are there, you know, in my poetry? Why in his poetry, women? The father was there, you know, silent behind the wall or maybe behind the door, but the mothers were there and mothers were in the courtyard, backyard, front yard, talking in multiple languages, multiple mother tongues. We have multiple mother tongues, so I stop here.
On that note, we'd also like to take this occasion on this panel to have you give away the prizes, 3 prizes for the poetry competition that we had for the Festival of Poetry with Prakriti of edition 11. So can I sort of request you to give away the 3rd prize, Srilata? It's for the young lady Aditi Das Gupta, if she's here and if she could come and take it. The 2nd prize is also for a young lady, Gopika Navneet. And the 1st prize goes to Rudransh Kantaria.
Rudransh. Big clap, you know. Ranvir. No, Ranvir, please. Yeah. Rudransh. Ranvir, come. Aye. Wait a second. Let Ranvir sir come.
Oh, he's a student. Wonderful.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. I also have the wonderful honor and privilege of announcing this afternoon something which is quite special, which is in memory of a very dear friend, Geeta Doctor, the writer, journalist. We are setting up at the Prakriti Foundation a Geeta Doctor Poetry Fellowship. It is instituted to support the sustained practice circulation, and visibility of contemporary poetry, and to affirm poetry as a living art shaped by attention, time, and rigor. The fellowship is awarded to one poet with no restriction on language and carries a grant of rupees 5 lakhs along with 2 poetry residencies. The fellowship supports the writing, translation, editing, and publication of that poetry, and may also be used to enable the fellows' participation in literary and poetry festivals in India, readings and related engagements connected to the life of their work. The fellowship is intended to offer time, resources, and mobility, enabling the selected poet to deepen their practice, to carry their work across languages where needed, and to extend its reach beyond immediate geographies and audiences. Instituted in the honor of Geeta Doctor, whose work and commitment have shaped cultural conversations in contemporary India, the fellowship reflects a shared belief in poetry as an enduring necessity and presence in public life. I'd like the family of Geeta Doctor who are here, her daughter Meenakshi, and her sisters Surya and Manjula to come on stage, as I'd like Srilata to announce the winner. And if I might request my dear friend Nirmala Lakshman to come up on stage and to please present it to the recipient.
Okay, it's my great pleasure to announce the winner of this first edition of this very generous, lovely fellowship, the Geeta Doctor Fellowship. It's being awarded this year to the poet Ilampirai. Please be on stage. Ilampirai is the pen name of Panchavarnam. She is a widely published, well-known Tamil poet. She works as a teacher in a government school. And I think what makes me happiest about the fact that she's the one who's got the award is that I know that she has several poems left in her. And I'm very, very convinced that, given a year and a half, we'll have another book of poetry. She's recently come out with a collection, but I know that speaking to her and so on, there's also an interview we did with Ilampirai for our book Lifescapes. So I know just how committed she is to poetry and what a brilliant poet she is. So congratulations.
Can I request if Manjula or Surya would like to say a word, and then afterwards for Nirmala to say something.
Thank you so much, Ranvir. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Nirmala, for making this space possible for us to speak about Geeta. I just wanted to say that I grew up as one of 3, and now we are just 2. And Geeta was always our leader, and I would like to say that in this too, she has led us. She has gone ahead on a difficult journey, but she did it so beautifully that we as her family have felt comforted and grateful for her presence in our life. Thank you so much.
This is an unexpected, sweet, and great honor because Geeta was very much their family, but she was also our family. And she was one of those most wonderful, inspirational figures for me. And not only in her own quiet way did she help me move forward in my writing, but her remarks and her authenticity was something that we all revered and loved and held dear. So it's a great privilege for me that to be here today and to be part of this. And my wonderful friend Ranvir Shah, with his generosity, has decided to support poetry, which I'm sure Geeta, she might be laughing from wherever she is, looking at all of this, but I'm sure she'll deeply appreciate this, and grateful to Meenakshi and Geeta's sisters to have given me this privilege. And Ranvir, thank you very much. It's a wonderful thing, and I'm sure it'll go from strength to strength year upon year, and we all will continue to miss her and value her, what she has been in our lives. So thank you very much.